everyone. Perry here in Park City with another Collider interview for you. Thanks to the fine folks at Kia for bringing us to the Supper Suite and making this happen so we can talk Run, Sweetheart, Run today. Big congratulations. How are you all doing? How are you feeling? Are you ready for all the Sundance craziness?
I've talked my way through a lot of craziness, but we're in the home stretch. We're premiering tonight. I'm really excited.
You should be. The Egyptian is quite the venue to be screening at. So a lot of people out there probably do not know what the movie is just yet, so I'm going to give this duty to you. Would you mind giving the brief synopsis?
Sure. The Run, Sweetheart, Run is about a woman who goes on a terrible blind date, has to leave and run for her life through the streets of Los Angeles at night.
What is it that inspired that story? Because
there's a terrible blind date I went on. Yeah.
There are so many things at play in this movie. I was wondering what concept came first.
Well, there's so many concepts. It's actually strange to say that a horror film is deeply personal, but this is probably the most personal film I've made. It started with a blind date that I went on where I was so excited and the guy looked amazing on paper. We went back to his house. It was not amazing. I ended up running out without my shoes, without my purse, without my phone, and I ran from the Hollywood Hills to West Los Angeles where I was living.
Oh my, that sounds really intense. I don't mean to ask if you have any intense experience along those lines, but have you ever been in a situation where like a blind date or anything of the sorts is just not what you're expecting?
What have I been in? I think it's more just the idea of sort of going into any situation and it just going very much leftward, which I think is a really exciting, obviously horrifying when you're actually in it, but exciting concept for a film to explore that and see what sort of what human nature does, that sort of fight, flight or freeze scenario. Which obviously you injected your experience.
I ran. You ran.
Flight. Yeah, exactly. Run, Sweetheart, Run. It's in the title twice. Yeah, Pilou?
I've been on a blind date with a supermodel once, a Danish girl, and it was my brother who hooked us up. It's not as bad as this date that Shana's been on, thank God. And it was actually a very good date because I ended up with her at her apartment. And we were just about to have a wonderful evening. And then she turned to me and she looked at me and she said, I have a terrible headache. And I got very disappointed, but I totally accepted because I'm a decent man and not one of those weird old sexist guys you can find in the past. So I said, okay, cool. And then 12 years later, I was at a dinner party, and we were sitting and talking. And now I'm happily married on 13 years. We were sitting and talking, and then one of the girls said, "You know that when you liked the guy, but you didn't want to go to bed with him, you would say you had a headache." And I was sitting there at that table, going like, "What? Seriously? Is that like an excuse women use?" And she said, "Yeah, I've done it like 1,000,000 times." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And now I'm using it all the time.
Like headache, allergies, I don't know, something.
I'm allergic to nuts.
Can you tell me a little bit about playing the role of Ethan in this? Because you're a little too good at playing villainous characters. So I'm curious, what is it about Ethan that you've never done before? And of all of the villains that you've played, who do you find the scariest of the bunch?
The one you cannot predict. The scariest thing about people is that the ones who doesn't yell. The moment you yell at people, you cannot bite. So always be afraid of the dog behind the barking dog. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the one that's going to go for your throat. With Ethan, I actually got the chance to do both. What I loved about the script that I was so privileged to read when Shana sent it to me, I read that energy. I read her experience. I read all the things that she knew about. And you could feel that. So the character was there. It was just for me to be a puppet in her arms, and I loved it. But you know when you're talking about the Olympics, and they always say, the CEO of the Olympics, he always goes like, he says, "This has been the best Olympics so far." That's how I feel with this film. This has been the best villain I have ever done so far.
It's a good feeling to have. Did the two of you ever talk about Ethan's past, like prior dates he had been on? Because that's what I kept wondering at. Like, you can make a whole anthology about him.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about that. I think the most funny thing that we talked about in the beginning was like the romantic Ethan and like who to model. Like we were talking about Hugh Grant and Richard Gere and just like watching the body language of those guys, because I think what's really special about Pilou's performance is his body language totally changes from the beginning of the movie to the end. I mean, everything changes. He's really playing two characters. But I love like the romantic comedy version of Pilou.
So do I.
Same. It was those
All right,
scenes
can
on
we
set
do a
were
romantic
great.
comedy?
Where you just take everybody roller skating
let's
on
do
a first date.
Let's do a film called Pretty Man, and then I'm a guy you'll pick up on the streets or something like that.
Alan, can you talk to me about reading the script for the first time? Because seems like an intimidating role to me for so many different reasons. It's, you're running around the entire movie, so there's the physical element of it. And also, it's a highly emotional performance where I don't think you really get a breath the second things get going.
Yeah, that was definitely something I didn't anticipate, aside from the fact that running was in the title twice, was the fact that I think we spend like 12 hours a day minus lunch break, just hyperventilating, which kind of puts you in a place of, I'd go home and it like even my dreams were beginning to get a little bit like my body was in this constant state of like again fight or flight. But reading the script, it was a page turner, and I mean that I was in the makeup chair on another show, and I read through it in one sitting whilst I was having my hair and makeup done, and I was like, this is what a journey. And then the first time we spoke, we actually resonated in a few different areas, because Shana said that it's such a passion, angry. You wrote it in like a burst, and you wanted your daughter to read it. And so when I read it, I was like, I want my sisters to read this. And then immediately we had that connection, and sort of developing the character from there. One thing that I loved the way Shana has made Shari this character is that she's really smart, and she doesn't do anything for the sake of fulfilling the horror genre. So she won't just be like, oh, what's behind the door? Let's go into the door. It's horror. Like it's she's like, I'm not gonna go into that door because guess what? This situation sucks, and I don't want it to get any worse. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about picking the names for the characters? Because I'm always fascinated by that, and that does come into play in the actual story here. So how'd you settle on these two names?
Well, okay, so I first named Ethan's character Roman, and my best friend, her son is Roman, and she read the script and she's like, do not name this character after my son. And so I quickly changed it to Ethan. And I think what does Ethan mean?
Eternal something evilness. I don't know, not evilness. That's me doing poetry right now. Hey, Ethans. You're all evil.
And then Shari was like a name that Shari is actually my cousin, and no one can pronounce it. And so everybody calls her Shari. No one pronounces the name, and no one can pronounce my name. And for a long time, I didn't correct people. I would just let them call me the wrong name. And years later, I would be like, I can't believe I still have to pretend like my name is Shana. And I think it was a self-esteem thing. Like, why do women just accept that their name is being mispronounced constantly? So I thought I would give her a name that was mispronounced. And in the beginning of the movie, he calls her Shari. A lot of people mispronounce her name. And she goes, it doesn't matter. But it actually really does matter. And I feel like at the end of the movie, it does matter to her.
And it's Shari as in like Shari. Yeah.
Can I say one thing? My name is Pilou. That's not an easy name either. And I was shooting this series called Borges, where I was working with Neil Jordan. And it was my first international show. And I was so excited about it. It was Jeremy Irons. It was the whole shebang. I was going to sit on a horse. It was amazing. And then I got introduced to Mr. Jordan, or Neil Jordan. And I said, hello, my name is Pilou. And he was like, yeah, sure, boo-boo. You're sitting on this. No, but it's a joke. It was fun because the next day I was just you guy.
Thanks, you guys.
We're calling you Pilou today. It's a very exciting thing to have a film premiere at the midnight lineup. And one of the things that's really struck me about the entire lineup is how so many people are using the horror genre and familiar horror formats to, get at some other really heavy themes and topics very effectively. So I don't want to go into spoilers, but I did want to specifically ask you, so in the movie, gender plays a big role in why Ethan's able to hunt her throughout. So I don't know if you could loosely talk about that a little bit without actually giving anything away.
With which aspect of that? There's so many.
Many of them. Feel free to come at them from any angle you want, where we don't give any spoilers to our audience.
This really coded.
This is
chat.
it's so tough.
I'm gonna mess something up. I think I could just really speak to how personal it is for a woman. I wanted to create something that women would really relate to. That every woman, I think there is every situation in this movie, by being called a pet name, by a Uber ride, by getting in a car with the wrong person. It's things that every woman has gone through, from a blind date, and every woman fears. And what I hope most is that, people have a really fun time watching it, and they're scared and they're laughing, and it's a wild, crazy journey. But at the end of it, I do hope that people think what it was like, or to have a little more empathy for what women go through just on a daily basis.
I feel like that was a great answer, and that would have been a great way to end. But I do have one more thing.
Okay,
wanted to ask you about
You're like, what a great soundbite. I've got
Great
one more.
end, which is not.
the shot of the door running into and out of the house. Was that always your intention to capture that moment that way? Because it was a very interesting choice.
Yes. I was thinking of Ethan's power, and I was thinking, what is the scariest power that a protagonist can have? And I thought the scariest power a protagonist could have is if he can actually control the camera. And I thought that would be terrifying. And so I used that quite a bit in the film.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I have to let
you.
you go. You
Thank
guys have
you.
a premiere to get ready for tonight. So, again, congratulations.
Thank
you
you
for being here. Big thanks to everyone out there watching this interview. Also, thanks to Kia for making these interviews happen right here in Park City at the Supper Suite. Like and share this video before you leave, and we'll see you soon with more coverage from the festival.